Is the goal of Christian education just learning the talking points and their answers? Hi, my name is Ted Rosenblatt, and I'm here with my father, Dr. Rod Rosenblatt, and this is Talks with Dad Rod. This reminds me of being in high school and cramming for the test.
Yes.
You just wanted the stuff that mattered for the test, and when the test was over,
gone.
Out of there.
Yep.
I had more important things to do.
Yep. No, it's certainly beyond that. To put it at just a minimal level, you want to at least do what the best secular schools are doing, but that's just a start. The goal of it all is, I think, what many scholars have said, using the phrase thinking Christianly or thinking biblically about the same subject that the secular schools deal with.
Well, it comes across like the work that precedes the test is not sparking some sort of, man, there are a lot of buzzwords in this. All of a sudden I'm thinking any number of things that I don't want to say. That we end up in a sort of, and I'm probably going to use this more than once in a couple episodes, so my apologies if I'm redundant, sort of a shallow faith.
Yes, that is certainly, and many times I think, an accurate critique, which is really tragic. But think of our history. What we call the Ivy universities, Harvard, Yale, Stanford, all those universities began with the goal of having an educated Christian ministry in the New World. That was their goal. That's why they were founded. They're a long ways from that now. It's been a progressive degeneration, but that was the rationale when they were first founded. There was one strange exception to that. A university that rightly wanted to be called one of the Ivy schools, but from the very start said, but we are not going to have any of that religious rubbish here. That was Cornell. But in general, the Ivies were dedicated in the beginning to having an educated Christian ministry here in the New World.
And it seems, side note, that the ostensibly the schools with an ostensible Christian leaning of a sort migrated slowly towards the secular, not the secular towards the other.
That's right. That's correct.
It's a side note. I don't really want to spend time there, but we live in a culture that lives now on memes. Whether you know what that's an extrapolation of an older term, but about something being mimetic. But memes are sort of, think comic book level of quotes and so forth. Mm-hmm. Usually paired with some sort of art, some sort of picture or an animated GIF or that sort of thing. And this culture is used to digesting things. I used to say no longer than a tweet, but they've made the number of characters in a tweet way longer, and so it's become sort of a form of like a micro version of a Substack, right? So I can't even use that as a measure anymore.
Right.
That always appealed to me because I don't know why. Growing up, I always tried to distill thoughts down into something that would fit on a bumper sticker or a T-shirt or something like that. My brain just always worked that way. But this culture is used to digesting things like that. I have seen texts or responses on social media where it doesn't even seem that long to me, although longer than the norm. It might be a total of, in written word, like if you're going to do a paper, it might be 3 paragraphs, maybe 2 long paragraphs of writing. Not much. It's pretty quick in the scheme of things. And people will come in and say, I'm not reading that. It's too long.
Oh, good grief.
And so we're in a stage where people have a hard time focusing or being interested in the subject matter or any number of things. And in such a time, it's going to be an increasing temptation to approach, I think, or let me ask you, do you think in such a condition, approaching our Christian education that we might expect that it will also be boiled down to some bullet points? You're the one has written all the book outlines. You're used to outlining stuff, but we're in a culture that might find that a little too long. There are too many bullet points, and B, that it's not. It might be getting too in depth. People start getting bored, or they start finding something else.
One thing with an outline is if you don't want the details, you just stay left. If you just want to read the major points, you can go by Roman numeral, the old Harvard.
Understood. I mean, we don't have a tool that's that elegant. We don't have an app that everybody uses that does something like that. That would be nice. But I know they're out there, but they're niche. But what I'm saying is how much is this affecting, or how much are we in our culture leaning into bumper sticker level content for our teaching? Where there isn't anything really more in depth in the teaching, not significantly beyond the top bullet point.
If that's where we are, and you could be exactly right, it will be a result of the hideous education that we got as children from our earliest ages. Here the parents have to stand against a school system that wants to do that sort of thing.
Oversimplify?
Yeah, or make it short at all cost, because it cuts us off from serious reading of serious stuff. If the students don't get some practice at that, at least serious reading of whole chapters of great stuff. And then if they happen to get into college, that's required almost daily, they'll find it overwhelming. They should have had practice at it, at least in a small way, from their earliest schooling. Master a text.
It seems to me like, as I think about it, it seems to me that we've lost in what we Lutherans call the kingdom of the left, the sort of the secular realm.
Yes.
Even without going into God's law, but it seems like we've lost any sense of secular law, any blowback for not getting work done, not doing the thing. You know, we live right now, there's a great debate about how you should dress if you are a senator, if you're a United States senator. Entered the discussion now.
Or think of the school discussion to eliminate grades. Totally eliminate them.
And that's kind of what I'm saying is if you aren't completing stuff, if you never have a sense of you must do this.
Right.
At a bare minimum level.
Right.
Then there's negative consequences to that.
Right.
And we increasingly go towards saying it'll be okay.
Oh.
Somehow. In any number of ways.
Yes.
That's the way it appears to me. But presently, let's say we're in a church and we're in a Bible study of some kind. No, and I won't even say Lutheran. Let's just say, an American church of some sort.
Okay.
There's any number of them. The idea that the depth of the conversation doesn't get significantly more than the original talking point that started the discussion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There, I think the question is, when you were young, did your school teach you how to think? Or did it teach you what to think?
I posted this on Facebook. You and your house taught me how to think. Mm-hmm. So sitting around the kitchen table with you and a bunch of guys like Rick caused my thinking to have to occur.
To keep up.
I wanted to be in the conversation with the men.
Got it.
That's it.
Got it.
I wanted to at least not be an idiot in the room.
Okay.
And there were a number of places where I just ground myself into powder. No one knew, I didn't tell you guys about this, but there are places where I did something, I used a word exactly wrong. Oh man, I just beat myself up over that. And it was different than trying to make sure I was getting a good grade in English.
Sure.
I knew the words, but I'll tell you what, I have never used a dictionary more than when I wanted to be engaged in a thoughtful way with the man. I knew the idea I wanted to communicate. I just needed to have the right word. I didn't care if anybody was impressed with my vocabulary or anything. That wasn't the point. I at least wanted to be concise and accurate.
Right. Well, then, in a certain sense, I was helping you do what the school should have done.
There isn't conversation in school. I watched what you taught the guys, how you prepared the guys to go to Oxford. And I learned about what it used to be like back when Luther was teaching.
Right.
It was far closer to what we would consider a rowdy bar than it was a classroom.
Right.
And I really think that more education can be gotten from there. There's a freer thing that makes more sense. My brain works at that level. I can't do it if it's done in this little bento box of a constraint.
Right. Right.
It's much more difficult for my mind to go out freely and put concepts together that are being talked about.
I wish people like you were invited by the schools to talk to you, but you will never be invited, ever.
Well,
they're headed in exactly the opposite direction. I think purposely intending for an uneducated populace that votes.
Well, let me tell you this. The spirit of what you had in your home enticed me to want to learn to think. Thinking and processing and then getting the minor rewards from, they didn't realize that's what they were doing with me. But if I could be on point and think things through well enough, I didn't need to repeat what everybody was saying. It wasn't that. It wasn't a bubble.
Right.
It was free thinking. It was taking ideas and saying, what if this and what if that? But if it was cohesive and advanced the idea, even without the text, because I was never a good reader, then I would get a positive response from those in the room. And what I have tried to do, I can't do everybody, but at least I have tried to inculcate that with with my children, your grandchildren.
Good.
And you already see them engaging also in the kitchen, and they sort of start to tag team because you can see the same sort of energy is there, and they're very competitive, of course. So if somebody's feeling, if one of them perceives that one of them is getting an attaboy, well, then I got to get an attaboy, right? And it's its own reward.
Yeah.
But it causes them to do more. Thinking becomes fun.
Yeah. Engagement
at a deeper level becomes fun. And I think that when we're talking about this, again, you tell me, that spark is not occurring in a free form type of way in any number of places, and in this case, the church, which causes more depth of thought, which is fun at those points.
Right. Should be. Yep. Yeah, the church is the last to catch up, but we should be at the front of the pack because the culture has so intellectually degenerated that we should be like a light in dark place. It should be.
Well, and in spirit.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be just so burdensome to do it.
Exactly. The Harvard, the motto, the truth shall set you free, doesn't attribute it to Jesus. It just hangs there.
Small t truth.
The truth shall set you free. Maybe an ellipsis at the beginning. The truth shall set you free.
And now we are in an age of my truth.
Yep.
For those listening, I'm doing air quotes.
Or there isn't any.
Well, but that's functionally what my truth is.
Yep.
Is so subjective that it's meaningless.
Yep. If you want to read a full broadside attack on what you and I call modern education, it's a short book. It's by C.S. Lewis, and it's called The Abolition of Man. And it's a full broadside attack on what you and I call modern education.
I just thought of something in relation to some of the studies of money that I've been doing recently about how money can be compared in certain ways to language. Imagine if somebody came up with, we'll exclude a genius like Tolkien who had full license to do this because he just thought that way. But imagine if the average person just a whole bunch of them came up with their own language, their own words for things. I even saw some form of this in an episode of the 80s version of Twilight Zone, where they had a guy wake up and the whole language had shifted.
Wow.
So that like Wednesday meant dinosaur, and he had to go back to school books so he could communicate with people again.
I've seen it a couple of times where somebody says, "Do you speak Klingon?"
So, but see, all of those things are clusters of people. If somebody has studied Klingon, then more than likely they understand what you're saying. But the point here is if somebody comes up with their own form of something, if it's that subjective, let's say language, and they only use that all day, how are they going to be able to communicate with people?
Right.
There has to be a communal acceptance of the thing or it doesn't work.
That's right. That's right.
And that is sort of a kind of an underlying, near as I can tell, baseline upon which other ideas are communicated. If we can't communicate because everybody is making up everything as they go, and they're trying to make you conform to what they've come up with, then we're at a loggerhead. We can't communicate.
Think of Babel, Old Testament.
Yep.
What was the curse?
Changing of language so no one could speak to each other. And everybody ran off and went their separate ways. Now, I got the impression that it immediately created tribes because not everybody had their own language, but there was like some that had one language and others that had another language. That's purely my interpretation.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is kind of a deep dive. I would love to sit and talk about this for an hour. There are a lot of parts to this. And I tried to throw out a bunch of the ideas in this one little space, but.
Well, overall, I think there's the possibility that the Christian church in the West could again be like light in darkness if it will just see the calling to do it and do it well, because the culture has already voted for stupid. Now, if you're in a culture that votes yes on stupid, there is an ideal place for a tribe like Christians to say, we don't think we're going to follow that. We're going to do something differently. And our children are going to do it differently than you're doing. And maybe others will be drawn to it. Anyway, that we're not joining in on stupid.
But see, in your house, one of the things the good father gives is license to come up with another fun way to do the thing.
Yes.
You keep sort of the core, which is the spirit of it. Mm-hmm. And so the goal would be to see the kids be enthused about such an idea.
Right.
And create with their palate.
Right.
From that fun energy.
Exactly.
And not in a way that I would have.
Right.
I only celebrate that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing. Let's do it in such a way that encourages that they'll speak in a way to their generation that I won't speak. Mm-hmm. I'll end up becoming the old man in the back room. It's just not a
right.
Oh, come on.
Right.
So hope this is helpful and fun. And come to 1517.org for more. And we'll see you on social media. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us on Talks with Dad Rod, part of the 1517 Podcast Network. This podcast and all 1517's content is made possible through financial support by listeners just like you. Please visit 1517.org for more, and please consider clicking on the donate button and making a recurring or one-time contribution to help us share this good news in a world which so desperately needs it.